So yeah, thanks a lot for the invite. It's really an honor and a great pleasure to be with all of you here and to present a little bit about IDMP and our recent efforts to strengthening the drought impact monitoring. And as I said, we have this great collaboration with EOTEC. And so this is also really to bring our communities closer together. So I'm really very glad to present here. And I'm doing that not just on a personal capacity, but of course for IDMP and for our joint program between WMO and GWP. So I'm based at WMO, as Jaime just mentioned. And we have these two shared programs, the one on drought, which I'm speaking, but we also have a flood program, just to mention that is also shared between WMO and GWP. And yeah, in order to stay in time, I don't think that I need to explain to you. You are all experts and scientists in this field, so I don't need to explain to you why drought is something that really needs a special attention now more than ever. It's a creeping phenomenon. As a natural phenomenon, it will always be there. It was there in the past. It will be there in the future, perhaps even more pertinent. What we try to do with the program is try to disconnect it somehow from the disaster aspect. A drought does not need to be a disaster if it's managed well. There will always be probably some impacts, but there don't need to be catastrophic impacts. And this is what our program is about. And it was established in 2012. I'll come to that later on, in order to really already at the time with this intention to move from crisis management to risk management, to move towards a proactive approach to drought and not being surprised every time a drought hits and then just trying to follow up from the humanitarian side or whatever side. And I think in this last 13 years since we have been established, we are seeing a different little risk landscape in Europe as well. As you all face, I'm sure, in your countries. I am originally from Germany, and before, if I remember back in the days, 90s and so on, of course, there were dry periods, but now these droughts that we're facing almost every summer or spring are really something completely new. And of course, they are also related to climate change. And so I think this is a very pertinent topic and a growing topic. It's in the NAPs, in the national adaptation plans of most countries around the world, actually, as a priority. And yeah, we have structured our program around this. So just very shortly about the program, it was, as I mentioned, established in 2013 by these organizations. We are partner-based, so EOTEC is one of our very close partners. We have for other partners, so we work, for example, also very closely with the UNCCD, with the Convention to Combat Desertification, FAO, but also private sector partners and scientific partners. And we have a help desk where we support countries and other stakeholders on all questions related to integrated drought management. We have a community of practice. We develop and contribute to projects. We develop knowledge projects. I'll come to that later. We do capacity building and virtual exchanges. Some of you might have joined already for some virtual exchanges. So I'll invite you herewith also to really join our community of practice. You find it through our website, and to join our virtual exchanges. If you leave me your email address, we are also happy to add you to our mailing list. And as I mentioned, we have over 45 partners now, and they play a crucial role in our agenda setting and priority setting in our annual meetings. And perhaps also to highlight here that we had a major conference last year at WMO here in Geneva, the Drought Resilience Plus 10 conference, together with many partners. We should have put the logos there. So we were over 12 organizations, I think, organizing this together. And these are the key takeaways of these 3 days of gathering. There were around 1,000 people, a little bit less than 1,000 people online and on site. And the first one is what you already mentioned, to really go with this integrated proactive. And here it says perspective. That's wrong. It should be prospective aspect. So we're looking at risk in a systemic way. Having cross-sectoral and whole of society approaches, because often when we speak about drought management, the most affected people are not around the table, which is a big issue, because they need to be there, obviously, because they are not just out of political correctness or whatever, but because they are indispensable asset to drought management. Without them, we cannot do it. Women, the elderly, refugees, and so on. And yeah, about the technical aspects, of course, data sharing. I think this is also very close to your agenda. And yeah, to integrate that better into early warnings. Often drought is overlooked when we speak about early warnings. It's often just the fast onset events. That is also one of our current missions to mainstream drought more into this early warning thinking that has been strengthened a lot through this early warning for all initiatives that you might have heard about. Yeah, and then resource mobilization. I think this is and strengthen the political will is a very obvious one. That yeah, we're all working together as a community. But then coming to the topic, the drought risk and impact assessment is actually the second pillar of the three pillars of integrated drought management that we are kind of custodian and that we're further developing. So the first pillar is the monitoring and early warning, very close to what we're doing here at WMO. The second one is then the risk and impact assessment. Before it was vulnerability and impact assessment. We changed that so you can see it's really a flexible approach. To incorporate this understanding of risk as the IPCC and DRR is understanding it as the hazard, vulnerability, and exposure components together. And then the pillar 3, which kind of encompasses everything, how to really use that information from the early warning and from the impact assessment to mitigate the risk on the long run, to improve the preparedness when you're facing a drought, and then also on the during and after the drought in the response. And yeah, to perhaps start on the impact monitoring with this, I would like to invite you to either Google this baseline assessment of drought impact monitoring or take the QR code here. So we did this together with the National Drought Mitigation Center in Nebraska, also one of our partners, and several other partners. And it was also publicly reviewed by our peer reviewed by our community to really see what is our current standards, how is drought impact monitoring done, what are different approaches in different countries. And this case was really very much partner driven, because we got several requests, especially from Latin and Central America, of countries that wanted to develop drought impact monitoring, but they didn't know really how to go about it. And so we said, okay, then we take this initiative, develop this baseline assessment, and based on this baseline assessment, we have developed also guidelines that are currently under review. I'll come to that later. So why monitor drought impacts? I think it's very obvious. From the scientific perspective or from this technical perspectives as a ground truth to train models, also with to test satellite data and so on, then to justify mitigation actions. And I think this is missing here also to guide, of course, mitigation actions and to have a comprehensive impact and losses in different sectors, because often we're just looking into agriculture and that is completely underestimating the losses. And especially, I mean, you're all aware when we look into indirect impacts of drought, we're almost completely blind, and we just have some rough estimates on the global level on interruption of supply chains. For example, when Taiwan was hit by a drought, they couldn't produce microchips anymore. That impacted the whole supply chain for cars. These kind of things are not really quantified. Yeah, and considerations in finding and using drought impact data. And I would like to mention here Kelly Smith from the NDMC, who I'm taking these slides from, who was working also with us on this publication. And so the first idea when you think about what kind of impact you want to monitor is about the purpose, of course, like every issue, a challenge that you are approaching. So would this be academic or applied? Is this for a policy? Who will make the decision based on this impact monitoring data, on this impact data? And yeah, based on that, you need to start developing this approach. And there are different types of impact data collection systems that we identified. There are event-driven databases, and I guess all of you know the what is it called in Leuven, this Belgium disaster database, EDD, I think it was called. Then there are in situ conditions and impact monitorings, including also non-traditional sources like crowdsourcing. We're working with this a lot. There's also non-traditional ideas on media monitoring, scraping news, social media. All this can potentially be used and is not really used in a systematic way outside science at the moment. And then also other things like food and water security monitoring and other aspects that are impacted by drought, but that are usually not related directly when we speak about drought impact monitoring. And then another very interesting field of non-traditional data is like hospital admissions, insurance claims, touristic numbers, or so on. So these kind of data that you wouldn't connect immediately with drought, but that are driven by drought, and where you can see a drought signal as well if you can filter it well enough. And then just looking very shortly into these different types of data. So here are examples of event-driven databases. Yeah, the European Drought Impact Database, I think, is a very state-of-the-art impact monitor at the moment. There is the US Drought Impact Reporter. These are, I think, the best known ones. Then the EMDAT, that was the one I mentioned before, is not only looking at droughts, of course, but into all types of disasters, including non-climate or water-driven disaster. And then there are these regional or national ones, and I'm sure there are more than we can see here. But of course, there are limits to it. It's expensive. In regard of staff time, it's an uneven coverage. So there are limits to the use, also in regard when we look, for example, to indirect impacts. In situ, there are also a lot of examples from the Eastern European side. This was established in the Dry Danube project, the Czech drought monitor, for example, and other of these crowdsourced monitors like Kokoras, for example, in the Caribbean. So that's an important data source. Here's an example from this Czech monitoring from Czech Globe and Intersucho, that where we have engaged as well in the development in this Interact project at the time, which is still running, and we're still expanding that beyond the Czech Republic. And media monitoring, I think this is something that is rather new. This is done in a systematic way by the US and the JRC already, and some other systems, but I think it doesn't really go into a lot of the policy making and into the monitoring systems that actually are used for decision making. So this is something I think that needs to be strengthened, where there's a huge potential, because compared to traditional drought monitoring or drought impact monitoring, you really know what is the impact on the society in the way it is communicated. And there is an example from the US on that, on the Drought Impacts Toolkit that has been developed by the US. The fourth one that we mentioned before was the water and food security monitoring. You know, I guess, all FuseNet. There are others as well that are not global, but rather on a regional or even national level. Of course, when there is a famine, it's usually connected to, or often connected to a drought. And this gives, of course, indications about the impact on the humanitarian sector, and can prioritize and guide interventions by humanitarian sector or governance, the national governments. And then this very interesting one on the data that may show a drought signal. We have here the examples: crop yield, insurance claims. I mean, the crop yield is, I think, a very obvious one, but the other ones like disease tracking, tourist visits, energy production, wildfire is often connected to drought, but also extreme heat. So there are very interesting ones. We were talking in Switzerland here also about the ski lift data that could be used to track if there is winter droughts and related things. So there are a lot of opportunities that need to be, of course, then really tailored, validated, and calibrated to very local or national conditions. And here, the EDORA of the European Drought Observatory is really trying to put all these together. And I think they're doing a great job on this. And yeah, perhaps this is something that will be discussed perhaps a little bit more today. Perhaps also for later discussions, key questions when it comes to drought monitoring is who feels the effects of drought, who feels the impacts. This can guide us on how drought impact monitoring should be done. What regions are most vulnerable? Of course, this geographic asset and priority setting, I think, is important. And when we speak about droughts, it's always cross-sectoral. I think that makes this hazard so complex, because it's not just affecting a specific region or so, but it can have very indirect impacts and remote impacts. And yeah, this is still not completely understood and not at all monitored. And as I mentioned before, we have published this baseline drought impact monitoring report. And based on that, we have then developed a shorter guidelines with a real checklist on how to establish the drought impact monitor, probably mostly addressing national institutions, but could also be regional. And if you're interested, and we sent this out, I think at the beginning of the month or last month for a community review. And if you are interested in reviewing this as well, we would be very grateful. And we just reach out to us. I think that either I put it in the chat, my email address, and we share it with you and would be very happy to receive your feedback on that. And then also to invite you again to our community of practice. If you Google IDMP and community of practice, you will find it. You can register there and then discuss with currently, I think we're over 250 members on such topics, and share your newest papers and whatever kind of materials you want. Yeah, and here's my email address and Bob's email address, who's the head of the IDMP as well, Robert Stefanski. And with that, I hope I was not too much over time, and give it back to you, Jaime. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks to you, Valentin. It was full of ideas for many of us, I guess, on our experience, on gaps that we have forgotten while practicing our fields of analysis, and also in the way to the integration into the policy and to the impact assessment and response. So we can only thank you for this amazing presentation. And now we will start to make some time for the introduction to Koen, that is also a great expert on these matters. I'm sure we all will be willing to hear from him, because Koen received his PhD, so it's also from the academic part of the analysis in drought, but from a very interesting perspective. That means that he was focused on the impacts. Many times we forget, coming from the bottom of the analysis of the data, because also the data is important, as Valentin was mentioning. But of course, we have to go through all this feedback of feeding our knowledge from the analysis to the policy making, to the policy design, and also integrating back all the information from the users. And that's why Koen is going to speak particularly on the regional perspective, on how these projects like the CENTAUR can integrate this information from the bottom to the top, because he was working not only in VITO these 2 years, but also before on a lot of Earth observation tools for drought impact detection and the prediction, especially the prediction and the forecasting of this information into the integration in systems that can provide information more in real time for the response of our systems for emergencies and geohazards. So please, Koen,
Yeah, thanks, Jaime, for the introduction and for inviting me. I will share the screen. Okay. I don't know if it's visible yet. Now it should be. Okay, So hello everyone. And actually, while I was taking notes during Valentin's very interesting presentation, I think this one actually aligns pretty well, because in this very short spotlight, I want to highlight a bit what we've been doing in the CENTAUR project. It's a Horizon Europe project. We're nearing the end already of the project, but I think what we have done is quite interesting and actually aligns very well with some points that were previously touched upon. Let me go to the next slide. So the CENTAUR project itself, in a nutshell, it's a Horizon Europe project, so meaning a big project. Also, those who have worked on Horizon Europe projects know that it's usually a lot of partners involved, takes quite some time. And we're actually nearing the end already. The project itself ranged a bit the full spectrum of the water-related issues, looking to both flooding and droughts. And the idea was really to set up a pre-operational platform, which is able to provide early warning information both on the flooding and on the droughts to various end users. The idea in the project was really to focus on the impacts and not as such on the occurrence of a drought as such. That's also why, if you look to the list of the partners that were involved, we also integrated people from various fields. We used weather information, really weather forecasts, where ECMWF was strongly included. We provided some information on Earth observation that we could see for droughts, but we also had people looking at media mentions, for example, really monitoring what media mentions were and seeing what potential impacts of droughts were, because yeah, like Valentin also mentions, this is also a variable source of data that you can use and that you can try to integrate. So the idea really of this platform that we developed, or this pre-operational platform, was to see whether we can build and add all of this information into one tool where end users can find all of this information. So where we currently are, the project has been running for quite a while, and we're close to ending. So we have been working quite a lot on specific use cases in that regard, mainly some urban flooding cases in Europe, for which we actually are also currently in an operational stage, where we are issuing that we see based on meteorological information that we have risks of urban flooding, where then people who are looking to media and more the socioeconomic context provide really some information to the local municipalities, basically. But also the droughts are very important, and for that we focus mainly on sub-Saharan Africa, where droughts also often lead to conflicts, because they lead to quite tense situations, and therefore also lead to quite some political instabilities. And that's a bit where we really wanted to make the connection and really wanted to focus on. So currently we are in what we call the hot phase, which is an operational phase. So that means that all of the things that I mentioned before, the media monitoring, providing meteorological drought forecasts, looking to the Earth observations, are done as of now in near real time. So that's a bit on the general scope of the project itself. Of course, we want to look at different levels of this drought. One of the very key, I think, developments that was done in the CENTAUR project was done by the colleagues of ECMWF, who have focused mainly on the meteorological droughts, of course, where they launched the ERA 5 drought specific indicators. Mainly, they are now providing, I think, almost near real-time data on SPI and SPEI, which are very, I would say, famous indicators of meteorological drought. And within the project, they've also been testing whether forecasting of these drought indicators makes sense. I don't think they are operational and ready yet to be presented to the public, but this is really showing that there's also some research going on in that field. Then on the agricultural impact side, that's really something where Earth observation comes in, but I will focus more on that later. And then as a final step. And now that I look to the slide, I see that I listed them 1 to 1, which is a bit strange, but maybe also not that strange after all, because actually the impact related indicators are very important and is also where a lot of research is missing at the moment. We looked indeed to indicators of food and water security. We scraped information from social media, also other media sources, information coming from FuseNet, and also we try to build models, or to try to make an early warning system that is able to identify situations, environmental conditions where the number of displaced people and violent conflicts can become more prevalent. In this very short scheme, you can already see what kind of information we put together in trying to model a bit how conflicts could increase or decrease over time. And basically what we did here, or this is what a partner of us did, is try to link the dimensions of conflicts and the information that we could find of an impact of conflict, and try to link this to a lot of information that we had on droughts, on economic security, and all of these kind of things. And there we could actually find a way to try to predict in some way that some conflicts might be happening in the near future. And that's a bit the main impacting where we focused on, really on the human side of what a drought also can be. Now, my expertise itself is in this Earth observation, where it is very often used. Also, mostly what you would see are NDVI-based monitoring or indices. They are, I would say, most commonly used indicators. Also in Earth observation, they provide information on vegetation greenness. If your NDVI is low, then your plants look brown or yellow, and if it's high, then it's an indicator for healthy vegetation, let's say. And they are also often very used for as a proxy for vegetation productivity. In a very short leap, you could say this is yield, but that's also a bit between brackets, I would say. But one very strong argument that people pose against using NDVI, for that matter, is that changes in greenness of your vegetation of the plants only occurs as a late response to water stresses, and that you can actually do quite some things before that. And there are indeed quite some different Earth observation techniques that you can use, for example, thermal or more hyperspectral information that would get more early signals for water stress in plants. But there's always a trade-off that is quite important with how complex you want to make your indicator and how understandable it is. Like I said, the NDVI is the most commonly used. It's also the indicator that would be understandable to other non-EO experts. Also, a big importance is the availability of satellite imagery and the temporal resolution that you have. So it's always working a bit with thresholds. And using these thresholds within CENTAUR, we decided to go for an NDVI-based monitoring approach because we really wanted to make it as accessible as possible so that people can actually understand what it means that we're trying to do, also to really increase the impact of what we're doing. So the idea, what we did is that we made a spatial clustering first of historical NDVI time series. The idea of this is that we have more or less pixels or areas that behave the same in the past, so that when they are subject to a certain meteorological condition, that they will also behave similar in the future. From this, we derive an indicator which we now very easily call the agricultural drought risk, ADR, which is basically just counting the number of pixels where our NDVI anomaly that we observe is low. So is below a 15th percentile, so it's lower than we would expect. And we divide it by the number of pixels that are currently in the growing season. This is also very similar to, I think, how ASIS works. For those who are familiar with the ASIS system, the vegetation condition index there, it uses more or less the same approach, minus, I think, the spatial clustering. This makes also the system very flexible to what we want to adapt it to. If, for example, in a country we see that we need to relax it a bit, we can change with the percentile values. And in this case, you can see a visualization of how it actually looks like in the platform that we have built in the CENTAUR model for, in this case, a severe agricultural drought risk, which is with the lower percentile. So really when things are going very wrong in terms of NDVI. So really we're seeing quite some issues for vegetation productivity. And in this case, we focused on grasslands to also make sure that we're not only covering croplands, but also looking to impacts on livestock. So since the NVI is always a late response, we decided that actually it would be interesting to have an idea of how the NVI will look like in a couple of days or within a couple of months, because then you're actually able to say something about what will happen to your vegetation way in advance. And for that, we used actually a machine learning model where we used near real-time Earth observation data like NVI, but also the indicators that I mentioned that are actually better predictors to say what's happening now at the moment. So soil moisture indicators and other water stress indicators are included in this model, as well as some environmental data. And from this, we were able to build a model, a forecasting model that is able to predict how the NDVI or the anomaly in NDVI will look like in the next 10 days, within a month, and within the next 3 months. It looks quite okay, and that's not just because I'm trying to sell it as a good product, but also because we compared it to quite some other things that are out there. And the interesting thing is that because we use meteorological forecasts for this, we also have a range of uncertainty about how certain we are that the NVI will look like this. And if we compare this for a validation period here, for example, for 2021, 2023, we see that actually it is also very similar to what ASIS, which is a monitoring product, looks like. So that is really an indication that what we have currently in a forecasting as a prototype is actually also comparable to what is out there in a monitoring stage. Of course, we still have some issues at the onset and the end of the rainy seasons, but those are, every model has its limitations, and I think that's something where we should really try to focus on and try to get these things better for our next version. As of now, in this CENTAUR project, this was piloted for 3 countries, Mali, Mozambique, and Somalia. You saw it earlier as well. The CENTAUR project is almost over, so we're always still actively looking for new cases where we could try to implement this, see whether the model that we have developed, is it extrapolatable to a completely different area, for example, and whether the impacts that we get are different or not, because every country, every region, even maybe even every town has its own security issues, has its own resilience. So that's really interesting from our side. If you're interested in some more technical details on this development of the forecasting, you're always free to read this paper, of course. That's it. I think from the CENTAUR side, if you're interested in any of the things, also on the flood side, feel free to reach out, not just to me, but also to Valerio Botticelli from EOTEC, who is leading the CENTAUR project. He will have a very good idea also on the more impact-related indicators. That's it from my side.